This is your host, Jim Obermayer, for the Sales Lead Management Association radio program, coming to you on behalf of the 8,400 worldwide members of the SLMA. You can tell it's live. SLMA Radio is a syndicated show, and our archives have 257 shows and 340-plus executive interviews. Our producer is Paul Roberts.
Yes, sir. We're all cracking up here as you. We've only read it about 10,000 times, sir.
We're coming to you live from our studio in Costa Mesa, California. SLMA Radio is part of the SLMA Live Network. You may subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, and we're also available in the Stitcher app for Android users. And Paul, we're hitting 56,000 replays, several million minutes.
Wow.
Today we've got a great program. How does pay for performance work in lead generation? It's an interesting topic, and I've been involved with this off and on for many years. Not every company has the guts for it or the experience to pull it off. In our interview today with our SalesStaff CEO, David Balzen, we get an understanding of what it takes for pay for performance models to be successful for both parties. Certainly, many companies want someone to take all the risk while they reap the benefits. I've been approached by this off and on when I've been in the business for many years. We'll see how this works and some of the pitfalls for both parties. David is the founder and CEO of SalesStaff and is responsible for the company's strategic and operational leadership. He's a demand generation executive and pioneer in lead generation for B2B industries. He helped lead the industry through the development of demand generation systems, leveraging inbound and outbound lead generation strategies. He's got a long resume. David, welcome to our program this morning.
Well, thank you, Jim, and I appreciate the invitation.
Well, great. I love this subject because I was in the telemarketing industry years ago when I was with the Inquiry Handling Service and then with EdTrack Corporation, and I've had some experience, and I've always had people interested in lead generation who would come to me and ask for pay for performance, and many times I shied away from it because I began to see that I had no control over their marketing. I had no control over their product. I had no control over what their product was thought of in the industry. And yet they wanted me to go out and work on the come that we could create sales for them. That's why I was so interested in this subject today. How do we tackle this? Your company, SalesStaff, tell us a little bit about it before we get started here.
Well, before we dive into that, SalesStaff is we're a national provider B2B and high-tech industry sales appointments and leads. So our firm, we're working with companies in the mid-market space up to the enterprise space, typically working with companies that have maybe as few as 5 or 10 full-time salespeople managing a pipeline up to could be several hundred or more sales team members. And these companies are, they're looking to build their pipelines and, advance deals and keep their people in front of, active opportunities. So we partner with them to generate these opportunities on a pay-per-performance basis. We're probably going to hit about, I think we're forecasting this year a production to exceed about 19,000 attended sales appointments in 2015. So we're ranking up there pretty high as one of the largest outsourced producers of sales appointments and leads.
We usually don't run programs based on companies. We tackle subjects, but in order to tackle the subject today, we really have to talk about your approach as a company because it's really important in this as we look at this. So I can see your website in front of me here. Now, you do the pay for performance through appointments. You do lead generation. Do you do actual sales programs? Do you sell for companies?
We're not an outsourced sales company. Where you would outsource that particular function. We're, at the early stage of the sales cycle, generating the lead, in the, top and mid funnel, kind of sales development.
So people pay for performance for for each lead that you create or each appointment?
Yes, that is correct. And that's all they pay for.
Okay. And are these, I found some years ago a lot of startups would love this because they don't have sales expenses and they wouldn't mind it. But But you work for some fairly sophisticated companies that still like this model, don't you?
We've learned a lot over the years about this model. When I first got into this, many years ago, it was still widely, unexplored. There wasn't a lot of vendors in that space. It was easy to find a call center or a B2B telemarketing company. But even then, in the late 90s, they were on an hourly kind of model or pay-per-seat model. There's been over the last, I would say, 15 years, there's been a significant amount understanding and just from experience and research and tracking over the last 15 years. I can only speak for my company. I think other companies as well in my space have made progress in these areas as well. We've identified, some key areas that are really important to aligning yourself with the right client and the client aligning themselves with the right vendor. Three things come to mind, to me, when I think of what an ideal, alignment with a client would look like. One, I think, is first and foremost that they have an established sales team. So, like your comment a minute ago about startups, you're right about that part. Startups, they love this. They starve for it. It could potentially give them a quick jump into the market space, but there's some fundamental problems with working with startups sometimes when they don't have established sales systems, salespeople, and processes in place. So one of the things that we have found that's important, the foundation of a good client partnership, is that they've got that sales team in place, and even defining it to the point of number of salespeople, we've found that maybe 5 or more salespeople on the low end would be starting to be a healthy looking sales environment and within a client on up from there. Secondly, they need to have a CRM in place. So the CRM allows them to properly manage what the lead generation outsourced provider is bringing into their sales funnel. Yeah. So they need to be able to properly manage that, track that, nurture those opportunities, follow up with those opportunities, properly document what's happened, be able to communicate, collaborate with the lead generation vendor about what's going on with that, and all of that needs to be captured in a CRM. And then lastly, they need to also have a certain type of price point environment when they make a sale. We have found that, in the B2B space, in a pay-per-performance relationship, what really starts to make sense for companies to outsource this is when they have a price point around anywhere on the low end of about $45,000 to $50,000. Some of our clients obviously have price points in the hundreds of thousands, even millions, but the kind of the 45 to 50K on up is where you start to have enough return on investment when you make a sale from those appointments to justify the cost of a pay-per-performance program and what those costs per leads are.
Okay, 1, 2, 3. Establish a sales team, got to have a CRM system, and have to have a decent price point so the return on investment is going to be there. Now, what about the right vendor? You said there are also 3 things in choosing the right vendor.
Yep, the vendor's obviously huge as well. Looking for some key elements about how that vendor operates and what their models look like. These days you can go out there and you can find a lot of pay-per-performance lead gen vendors, but when you start to peel back the layers, you'll learn that all of them are very different. First of all, if I was a client out looking for a lead gen provider, I would first of all, want to understand how they're leveraging technology in the process of marketing. Do we just have a bunch of people smiling and dialing on the phones going down a list, a static list of contact names, or do we have more of a sophisticated technology landscape of marketing automation and with a telephony component to it that intelligently is driving all the marketing activity? That's just really important, number one, for them to be able to accurately forecast, being able to step up and commit to a pay-per-performance service level agreement. They need to be able to forecast, what amount of activity they're going to need to produce in the marketing part of this to generate a contracted number of appointments or leads back to the client. Without sufficient technology, you just can't do that. And then secondly, you need to take a look too at, what kind of qualifiers are they guaranteeing you? So So taking a look at their statement of work, there should be some base qualifiers that are guaranteed contractually, certainly around, the target market that you're wanting to market to, certain sizes of organization, number of users, maybe the geography of the locations of where you're going to be marketing in on behalf of that client. There may be other specific business, criteria too that needs to come along with that. Each company's got its own different set of criteria. You want to make sure that the criteria is not just anyone that agreed to meet that was on the list. And there are companies that operate like that, and you're going to have a far fewer number of your appointments convert into your pipeline if you don't at least button down some of the basic, target market criteria and a little bit of the business criteria in the program. And then lastly, I would want to know a lot about their setup and discovery process. You probably shouldn't be paying for that if it's a pay-for-performance program. They should have a detailed onboarding process with their new clients, taking you through a knowledge share experience, where you're able to convey your messaging, your value proposition, your differentiators, really do a good job of modeling out who you're wanting to market to, and coming back with deliverables in that discovery and setup process, such as a marketing database, the marketing plan around the talking points and other things that will be happening in the marketing activity.
Item number 2, this qualification. I know of a horror story of a company that had 5 sales reps, and the CEO said, I want the highest level person I can go to. I want appointments with CEOs. And they drove their salespeople, and these salespeople were all driving within 200 miles of their locations. And the appointments were just rolling in and rolling in and rolling in, and they were paying for these appointments, and they got in front of the CEOs, no doubt about it. And then the CEO would sit there and say, well, just a minute. They pick up the phone and call the marketing director and say, do we need any of this? And the marketing director would say, nope, we're covered. And he'd hang up the phone and say, sorry, we don't need any of that. And so it really turned out to be the CEO wanted to talk to CEOs, but CEOs weren't the ones making the decisions. And getting that appointment with the CEO wasn't too difficult, but getting it to convert to something within the pipeline was a problem because they were going after the wrong people. And that's what you were talking about in number 2, weren't you?
Exactly. And it's so often when we're talking to organizations and we're gathering sales intelligence, we're down at the manager, coordinator level, gathering information, finding out what they're doing, what their pains are, what their needs are around that particular solution, and then working our way through the decision tree to get to the right stakeholder that owns that pain or need for the solution. Sometimes they do have to have C-level sponsorship, to get the funding for it. But starting at the C-level sometimes is just really going to waste some time, and you may, as you just described, find where there's no opportunity at all there.
One of the issues I'd seen continually is I would ask people, well, what is your sales cycle? And they say it's 5 or 6 months. And then 30 days into the program, they'd be going crazy because they weren't getting enough sales in. And
I know.
Well, the appointment was made. We got there. Your sales cycle is 6 months. Why do you expect us to be able to jump the sales cycle just because we got an appointment?
Yeah, there's that little thing called a sales cycle, and oftentimes it does outlive, the initial couple of months of marketing activity. So it's just a matter of lining client expectations properly. I know that our account managers are well geared for that. When we're meeting with our clients weekly, we're talking to them about individual opportunities we've generated, where they're in the pipeline, what the sales cycle length looks like. So we're properly setting expectations and making sure that their people are also, drip marketing to those during the longer sales cycle, keeping it alive, and that type of thing.
Well, I had a client I'm occasionally an interim sales manager for companies, and I recommended a pay-for-performance program, and it worked. And I said, but you're going to have to stick with this 9 months to a year because your sales cycle is about 6 to 9 months. And the head of sales, who eventually became the president of this company, it's a security company, said, I agree to that, and it's going to cost X dollars. And I agreed to that, and he agreed, and it went on, and the sales build took time, And he certainly understood the sales cycle, and it worked out quite well because he understood this right up front. It was going to take 6 to 9 months to start showing a serious return. At the end of a year and a half, they were so happy. It was just unbelievable how pleased they were, and they had 40 sales reps out in the field. We're going to have to take a break here for just a moment, David. When we come back and we talk about why don't more companies use these kinds of services, what are they afraid of, and then what is the eventual cost for doing this? Because everybody's going to want to know what the cost is. And then what are minimum programs and the training that goes into these programs and the setup fees and things like this? If we can come back in just a moment and talk about some of those things, it'd be great.
Sounds great.
Dum, 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 da, 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 dum, dum. You're missing out. This could have been your commercial you're listening to. 30 seconds, 60 seconds. Check us out. Contact James Obermayer, Jim at THESLMA.com to ask about our advertising rates on our radio network. We have 3 shows so far. They replay on iTunes, Stitcher, and are embedded on sites around the world. Don't miss out. Wouldn't you rather be hearing about your product, your company, your services? Don't delay. Contact Jim at THESLMA.com. Dum 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 da da dum 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 da 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 dum dum dum. Replay, replay, replay. This could be your commercial here on the SLMA Live Network. Just contact James Obermayer, Jim at theslma.com. Learn how you can get your commercial to replay forever on iTunes, Stitcher, our sites. And if somebody embeds this show, it would still be playing your information. 30 seconds, 60 seconds. We can make it for you if you don't have the time. Just give us the details. We'll record a great commercial for you. Again, find out more from Jim at THESLMA.com. Dum 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 da 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 dum 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 dum.
And now back to Jim and his guest.
We've been speaking with David Balzen. He's the CEO of SalesStaff, and we've been tackling the difficult subject: how does pay for performance work and lead generation? And David gave us a very nice primer here. What to expect are the right things from the client that he qualifies, and the right things for the vendor. That was really an eye-opener, and things I hadn't really thought of, David, and I've been in the business, so it shows you how much I've learned here. But when we asked to come back here, we were going to talk about why don't more companies do this? Why do some companies stay away from this pay for performance model? I found some people just afraid of that they're going to pay out too much money. Believe it or not, they're going to pay out too much money. It's kind of like I don't want to pay commissions too high because we're liable to be too successful. And then what's the eventual cost for doing these programs?
You know, I think there's a blend of reasons why companies are a little apprehensive with this. A lot of companies do outsource in the end. I think one thing is that, and this is just from hearing feedback, from our own prospects telling us some of their concerns, is that they have a lot of difficulty doing it themselves. So they go into it having a hard time understanding how in the world is an outsourced vendor going to do it when they're having trouble doing it. And that's understandable. But when you go in and start to take a look at really how they're going about doing it, oftentimes they're under-equipped. They don't have the right processes and systems in place to really manage a productive inside sales or internal lead generation program. They're lacking the technology. Their data is stale. I mean, it just goes on and on while they are having some issues. And then secondly, I think another reason that you'll hear out there is that they're afraid they're going to get burned. It's not going to work. They're going to lose their money, and that type of thing. So I think that's why it's important to really, first of all, vet your lead generation supplier. I would even recommend doing a site visit, interviewing, the people they're going to be working with, and really understanding who their clients are and what their core experience is to see that there's a good alignment there with their particular industry solution. There's a lot of companies out there from a high level, if you take a look at them, that do some sort of outbound appointment setting or lead generation, but when you start to take a closer look, as I mentioned earlier in the show, that there are vast differences. And there's, as a matter of fact, on our website, we've got a free download for a 50 questions to ask a lead gen vendor at SalesStaff.com that we offer anyone that's just out there shopping and wants to take a look at and ask us those questions, ask any other lead gen vendor those questions, and it may help them really determine if what vendor would be a good fit for them in the selection process.
All right, so I'm all ready to go, and I say, look, I've got my products are $50,000, and I've got a sales staff of 25, 50 people, and they need appointments, and I've got a CRM system in place, and so we meet the qualifications and what have you. How do we get started? How long does it take to get started? And what is the cost? And by the way, my database is stale. Do you provide a database?
Generally, it takes about 30 days to get the program off the ground and up to cruising altitude. So during that initial 30 days, we're collaborating with you or any other lead generation vendor should be doing this, going through some discovery kind of collaboration. You may have really the heavy lifting should be more on the lead gen supplier side, not so much the client side. The setup and the process of getting going shouldn't be a big headache for the client. The lead gen vendor should be owning a lot of the responsibilities and the heavy lifting of just getting the program built out and launched. Okay. But the client does need to participate. They need to be involved in maybe 2 or 3 different discovery type of meetings that may last an hour each over a 3-week period. Meanwhile, the lead gen vendor is behind the scenes working on either call plan or some type of marketing plan development and building the database, all to be teed up and presented to the client towards the end of the 30-day setup for their final review and approval.
Any cost for this setup?
There should not be a cost for the setup. We've never charged for setup. We are 100% pay per performance. There could be some suppliers out there that have some initial cost associated with data or just the overall, setup discovery process. But a firm like mine will bring the data to the table. They'll bring all the marketing plan development and the resources and technology necessary to deliver on a pay-per-performance model.
That's unusual. It's not unusual to see $2,500 to $5,000 setup fees for companies, so it's further showing the confidence you have in your facility. Now, you mentioned bringing the data. Do you provide the lists if the client doesn't have the lists that they want called?
We do. A lot of times the client doesn't have a list or they have stale data. We've just accumulated an enormous amount of data over the years. We actually, SalesStaff even owns a data company, Redbase Interactive as well. So we believe data is the foundation of this type of work in marketing. It's key. It's got to be fresh. We like socially enhanced data as well. A lot of times people will report more accurately on their LinkedIn profile where they are and what they're doing than you can find in some of the more public, B2B marketing lists and database. So just overall getting a good, clean, fresh, correct database is really key, and we prefer to provide it. A lot of times if the client just has maybe they have a very specialized list that's been built out around certain criteria, that's great. We'll use that. A lot of times we'll need to clean it or just update it to make sure all the contact information is right on there, and then we'll start using that.
So what does this cost per appointment or per lead?
Obviously it's going to vary a little bit depending on the vendor that you select. What we have seen out in the marketplace is anywhere from you're spending maybe $600 or $700 per a qualified appointment with a B2B company, all the way up to $1,000 an appointment. A lot of the cost per appointment is driven. With our particular company, it's driven by the criteria. We have a formula that we follow whenever we are in a pre-sales stage with our customer. We model what their requirements are in terms of criteria and other things around the appointments and leads, and then we base the cost per appointment based on the degree of difficulty of what that sales appointment is going to look like.
Okay.
So, a little volume has a little bit to do with it as well.
That always sounds expensive until you explain to people, well, look, I may have to put in 5 to 10 hours worth of calling to get one good qualified appointment.
You're exactly right about that. There are times where you can call. Of course, with SalesStaff, we're not just outbound cold calling, but we have an outbound 360 model that it's a proprietary delivery model where we're using a blend of outbound calls along with content development, email marketing, and socially enhanced data to create kind of a blend of inbound and outbound. So there's a lot of additional work that goes on with us, particularly to generate these opportunities. But even if it's just a straight cold call lead gen vendor, like most are, they're going to have to probably cold call anywhere from 20 to 40 hours just to get a couple of good qualified appointments.
Well, you've given us some great tips today, David. How does someone reach you?
You can reach us at SalesStaff.com or email us at info@SalesStaff.com. And we've got great resources on our website you can download and help you out with these reviews and decisions over this subject, and our people will be happy to help you.
Thank you very much. We've been speaking with David Balzen, CEO of SalesStaff, and the subject today was how does pay for performance work and lead generation. Thank you very much, David. Paul, over to you.
All right, as always, you've been listening to the Sales Lead Management Association Radio Hour, brought to you by our worldwide sales lead management experts. If it has to do with sales lead generation or sales lead marketing, it probably starts here with the SLMA Radio Hour.